This video is probably a major departure from my usual content, but it's been a long passion of mine, and the Agma Schwa himself has given me the perfect opportunity to show this thing. So, in 2017, I was multiple things. For one, I was cis, and I was, let's just say, a little bit full of myself. But more relevant to this video, I was bored out of my goddamn mind! So I decided to do something that would ruin me. So here's my journey through Kornish. Rwwaan. Sorry for the microphone, it's a little... So, Kornish isn't a well-documented language by any means. I had to rely on digital scans for this video, and there isn't a lot of free material, much less copyright-free. But it does very much exist. So, quicker overview on Cornish culture. The Cornish diaspora is split into 4 different groups, with 2 of them in France. Map. There's also a now extinct group, but we'll get to them pretty soon. I chose to try learning Cornish, mostly because why not, and also kind of because it was a semi-endangered language near me. God damn it, I just revealed my location, didn't I? Cornish folks are also conjectured by some to have telepathic abilities, which is kind of, kind of out there, but food for thought. Okay, so while editing this video, a friend sent me a paper that, suggests that there's a language that's related to Cornish, spoken in Egypt, written with Cyrillic. Why? Here are the consonants. Sorry for the quality is the only scan available. And also I stretched some things to fit onto the screen. A few things to note. La is indeed dental and may be fricativized. This is actually pretty well documented by Cornish standards. The syllabic nasals and the lengthened s are results of vowel elision. Va is usually categorized as a semi-vowel for historical reasons. 2 of my sources described foi as an allophone of va. Ya and wa have asterisks in this chart, as they are very much looped into the more than controversial discussion of Cornish vowels. The parentheses represent the rhoticized quality compared to Middle Cornish. And Old Cornish was historically a number of front vowels, followed by n. Owing to this, it's generally called the nasal e. E in modern Cornish is apparently in free variation with e to distinguish it from long e further. Also, the diphthongs shown at the bottom of this chart here are just the ones usually taught in the gtha variety of Cornish. It's the whole thing in linguistic circles that care about Cornish. So, as I've alluded to, the evolution of Cornish is a bit peculiar. To abridge a lot of things, the first shifts were probably deaffrication, and then loss of ga and wa, where have I seen that before, followed by a vowel shift in Middle Cornish, finalized with a rhotic shift in Modern Cornish, and we'll get into all of that at the end of the video. Middle Cornish is also responsible for vowel elision, wreaking havoc onto any semblance of phonotactics, such as vishin, where everything is a consonant. Wait, how's that spelled again? Oh god, I'm skimming through this script and O to me was a lot more enthusiastic. Like, my native language already has multiple word crimes in its orthography, so how bad could it really be in Cornish? So, the first Cornish text written in the modern script was by Korn, who is also non-coincidentally the namesake of the language. Cornish orthography is generally considered to be entirely decoupled from spoken language, To the point that there are some words that are written the exact same that mean very different things. Probably the most sensible part of the script is the obvious doublet Dave and David, both of which are derived from a folk story from the swoyy Kornish. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the swoyy. So, the swoyy was a group of poets, basically, in Westphalia, and they poeticized. They added a whole bunch of words with dual meanings. The only source that even pretends to claim where they went said they all died in a mine explosion. The evolution of Kornish can basically be boiled down to trying to save as much space as possible. Seriously, there's not much precedent for tßen to be spelled BXFH. Oh yeah, that dotless J character is called hash, and the dotless I you'll see in many words is called e. And if you thought I was going to list all the anomalies right here, I don't know what to tell you. The whole video is just doing down on its own. Okay, maybe one example. How would you pronounce this word? The standard Kornish pronunciation of this is actually shiv. Bonus points if you can figure out the etymology. So in 2008, Maxine Leverton, who describes herself as a former native speaker of Kornish, and I swear to God that's about the only coherent sentence on her website, tried to make a more phonetically consistent alphabet for Kornish. And it sucks. Here's a comparison using the letter she wrote when people criticized her for her handling of everything. The debacle is probably a story for another video. One that I won't make. A slightly more subtle change is in the ASCII reform, which is used mainly by Maksu folks on the internet because Kornish keyboards don't seem to exist. It's not that weird other than the removal of all diacritics and accents, X becoming S and the almost standard K to LR, which is more than a little controversial over there. Kornish grammar isn't that notable. I gave up on learning it at this point, but it was just a lack of motivation. Not that my mother tongue would have made it easy. The verb particles are shown here, with this thick line being where the root is positioned in relation. So, don gethad means to be lied to, but gethadon would attach to the next verb. Probably. The exception to this positioning in this chart would be the interrogative array, which is placed at the end of the sentence. Don't mind the two words for vomit. Kornish speakers do that hard enough. Also, Kornish grammar is mostly based on the teachings of Rwවන් the cannibal, who was a cannibal. Basically, verbs are the only thing you need to worry about. Nouns in Kornish don't have cases, and instead rely on the word order of generally SVO, and the... what? The pronouns? What the honk? The pronouns can speak for themselves. There's also second-person nominative in modern Kornish, only used in the interrogative. Yikes. Also, when I said that the word order is generally SVO, that's only true for written Kornish. In spoken language, people can do whatever the hell they want, and the meaning is just inferred from context. Aside from that, the grammar is pretty self-explanatory for a Germanic language. Is it Germanic? Is it Romance? Is it Austronesian? No one's sure. It's probably the most heated debate about Kornish right now. Here are the numbers in Kornish. No, I did not make a typo there. I and Z are spelt the same, even though they're about as different as I and Z. This is obviously a problem when reading Kornish. Numbers outside of these are fairly easy to construct. They're just hyphenated together. So 11 would be Beisai, Tßen ryyμ, and 36 would be Phi Beisi, 3 Tßen 6. Pretty straightforward. The names of the powers of 10 beyond 1,000 aren't well documented online, but people borrow numbers for Ultra French for this. I think. There's also an irregular Cornish word for 13, $j, which I am not saying again. It comes from Frisian. Cornish also seemingly had a fairly regular numeral system. In the past. Where did they go, you may ask? Well, Old Cornish numbers died. Well, the cardinal stayed, but basically it died. The powers of 10 retained their archaic fractional counterparts, and first was revived as borrowing from Ultra-French, Rwවන්, but other than that, our faithful cardinals, quotation marks, were all that remained around the time of Middle Cornish. Fortunately, there are now suffixes in modern Cornish learned from Ultra-French to help, namely ling for fractional, zwe for multiplicative, and zwe for ordinal. Yeah, the latter two are pronounced the same for some reason. In formal speech, you might sometimes hear the former as h instead, but it's also pretty rare. Compound numbers only have the last part of the word quote-unquote conjugated for this, so 11th is bês-rwên. Oh, yeah, j is 13th. That's irregular too. There also exists dai, a cardinal prefix, even though numbers should already be cardinal. This is because, historically, outside of count nouns, numbers actually took the fractional by default. This is mostly due to a cultural anomaly. Traditional Cornish units were otherwise impractically large. They would be superseded by SI units around the time late Middle Cornish was spoken, which didn't make things any less weird, mind you. The default unit of length was the hecking femtometer. Soaking of units, the only traditional unit to survive into modern usage is the dau, which is usually defined as the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. To further complicate things, numbers pertaining to dau are still implied to be fractional, so 4.5 dau would be daishoketip dau. But for rifles, which is also the case for everything else, it would be shoket ibringfihi. The other half is usually the suppressor. So, probably the only bit of culture to come from Cusgage map. Yes, there are more Cornish speakers in Wyoming than in California, is the dırnmь, which, as one blog puts it, is the perfect embodiment of the word cringefest. Basically, the main premise is to make something that's emotionally grimacing to experience. Translations of horrific works are generally submitted here, being part of the spirit, including a translation of Jeff the Killer, Nietzsche, and of course, Twilight, the latter apparently being made over the course of 4 mornings. So, with all that said, here's the example text in all of its tɣrk. Lao de Guanjai sigade fisoz. Rwවන් iedereen de wapĩ vsbang. Ibzwe bardır sage lao de Guanjai sakylrak de alkandalkal. Fusieux laudodon bostems it dırnmं vavor Rwמן. Before we get into the... Here's 11 Labs reading that text.
Road yoija, rPSD tɣrk, ksıŕã. Cdrar wapĩ ksıŕã. Yiymh bardır Rwษ์ yoja
Yeah, AI isn't comprehending this language anytime soon. And me reading that Maxine Everton thing I mentioned in the orthography section. Iãdk don donafravik vishin punvre dirure karskoen sage. I don't speak Cornish very well. And if you're wondering why I didn't submit something I've already shown you in this video that is infinitely more cursed, no. Also, the day I started work on editing, I found a theory floating around that Proto-Cornish had articles which were achieved through mutation. I'm not going to talk about things I don't know, so editing me here. I'm stupid. I'm not going to get into the vowels in this video, because no one is sure about anything, and I don't think the engagement would be worth being burned at the stake. Deaffrication happened. That's about as far as anyone can say about the palatal fricatives. The dentals aren't that interesting either. Intervocalic th devolves into h, and the turns into the mostly word initially. Slightly more interesting is that intervocalic the became the glide w, changing the vowel qualities of offending words. You know who else turned into g? G did. Galvanized into g before back vowels, ya word initially, and else just became g. Aspirated k also u with a rise around the same time. The woadics of Proto-Kornish are wa and hua, as far as that can be traced back. Most of the words that contained hua were apparently lost and replaced, and the woadics in general just got u with a rise to be more like a wa and hua, and initial wa became fwa. This would be the standing of the woadics by the time Middle Kornish started being spoken, and not much happens to them there, apparently. The fortition, I guess, of hua to gua in modern Kornish, 1, happened, and is 2, unconditional. So, this fricative is just a plosive now, and wa became more fricativized into wa. Thanks, Ultra French! Oh yeah, Thibault, if you couldn't tell already, gets loaned by Kornish a lot, and surprise, surprise, the phonologies don't exactly fit. So, wa and wa are analyzed as wa and evolves accordingly. Meanwhile, la is always just wa. As words with are borrowed early on, non-la colored la evolves like la, but defaults to r, which, on to the rhotics. The rhotics in Proto-Kornish are, oddly enough, ra and ra. The weirdness here comes from loan words, and you'll see why I've left this section till last. Ra attached onto vowels and sometimes became the vowel, and ra became a lateral ra sometime around Middle Kornish. Rhoticized vowels tried to bring some kind of vowel harmony in early modern Kornish, and ra and ra retroflexed, so now we have ra and la. The labialization of ra came from either English influence or a weird analogy with the woadics. There's also a pattern commonly taught in Kornish that if a fricative is followed by an R sound, the cluster is usually pronounced f. Is it true? Rhotics from loanwords or something. They're generally recognized as R sounds, somehow, and they're generally written with an R, but seldom actually correspond with Kornish's actual rhotics. Which means I get to do some really insidious things. English has got analyzed as r for self-explanatory reasons. All taps in general became la, ditto. The swoyy loaned German r as g, as it was the closest guttural to it in Middle Kornish. Ultra French r is also regurgitated as r, and Pseudo-French r would be analyzed as hua in Kornish words. With the recent fortition of hua, combined with the fact that the letter R is actually pretty well preserved in Kornish script, leaves me with this. In Kornish, technically speaking, hua is erotic.
But that's a bit of an oversized carrot.
Yeah, it is.